joining us today. And we are joined by Dr. Bonnie Cheuk. Bonnie works for AstraZeneca, and she's going to talk to us. I'm not going to spoil her introduction. I'm going to let her introduce herself. Don't worry, Bonnie. But she's going to tell us a little bit about herself and her KM journey, and share some of her experiences, throughout her working experience and life. So again, we are running a little thing whereby for the best question that we get today, Bonnie's kindly offered to do a one-to-one session with you. So please get your thinking caps on about questions you'd like to ask Bonnie and to run past her. And we'll pick that person out at the end based on the engagement through the chat box. So without further ado, we'll crack on. So Bonnie, as I said, I'm not going to introduce you. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So it'd be great if you can really tell us about your journey and some insights into your experiences.
Certainly. First of all, I just want to say welcome, or good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you're calling us from, right? From Scotland to Copenhagen to, UK, all around. So really nice to get connected. And I'm hoping that this is an informal chat, so we can, have some exchange. And I'm pretty open. You can ask me anything you want, and put in the chat, and even comments as well as I go through the session today. Maybe there are things that you resonate with your own experience. Maybe there are other things that I talk about that you find that is odd, and I welcome that as well. Diversity of thoughts and input is always interesting and will be very useful for me. So very nice to connect with all of you. Perhaps I start by sharing with you what I am currently doing at AstraZeneca, but then I'm going to tell you a longer story about my career journey. So currently I am the Global Capability Lead for Learning Agility and also Learning Culture at AstraZeneca. Simply speaking, it's about actually helping colleagues in the whole company, 70,000 people, to actually think about how do I build the agility and capability to learn anytime, anywhere. And that's linked to lifelong learning, right? It's not just about assigning training to you and therefore our colleagues need to do something. It's about really opening up the landscape, thinking about learning. One of the things that I've been promoting within my company, and I'm going to share a few slides with you a bit here and there, just to give you a glimpse of the work that I am passionate about. So within my company, you can see on the slide here, it's a 3 E's model that I've been introducing to my colleagues. What this 3 E's model is about is 3 E stands for learning through education, experience, and exposure. So that's why it's 3 E's. And a lot of times when we think about learning, and a lot of learning and development colleagues will think about it as education. But actually, there's more than that. I think for people in the knowledge management field, we will know that it's actually not just about reading or accessing, an online course, but it's also about exposure, like what we're doing today, right? Connecting with others, connecting with the network, and also learning through experience, through throwing yourself into, a challenging situation or learning something totally new and unfamiliar and sometimes quite scary. So anyway, so that's what I've been focusing on in the past year during the COVID year, as we all experience it. But when I first joined AstraZeneca 3 years ago, actually I was recruited in as the head of knowledge management, culture change, and change management for the drug development, the R&D unit. Right, you can see I was wearing 3 hats in one role, and it was really interesting. We were actually what we've started at that time is to look at how we can transform the whole drug development process, and transforming meaning that thinking about how we can go digital for the whole end-to-end process. So it's fascinating. So I feel privileged that I'm invited to join that group as part of the leadership team. But specifically, what I was looking at is actually about knowledge management. How do you get the knowledge to flow as part of the transformation, as well as looking at the culture change, which is about the knowledge sharing culture, collaboration culture, learning culture. So that's where the knowledge management field actually connect with the learning and development aspect as well. So that's my current role. I also want to take the opportunity to reflect back on my journey, how I started, and how I get to what I'm doing today. So and I'm curious also, if any one of you, feel free to put in the chat. I'm curious how many of you would consider yourself in the knowledge management space, or change management, or culture change, or digital transformation. Maybe just put the area that you are focusing on. I'm curious to hear whether any colleagues are actually working in all this, I call it the blurry space in between. So rewind back many years ago. So I'm originally from Hong Kong. I completed my economics degree in Hong Kong. And then I decided that I like to do something different from economics. And so I flew all the way from Hong Kong to Aberystwyth and in Wales, the UK, and I started a master's course in library and information science, and which was fascinating. So that was, I have to say, that was long time ago, right? And when I was in the university, I started learning to use WordStar, not even Word that you are using today. WordStar, I remember the first one. I couldn't figure out how to bold and do the italics and save document. Yeah, so that was me. And I decided I need to catch up with the information space, right? And the internet and all the exciting things that's happening. And that was just at the early stage. So I chose to do a library and information science course. And it changed my life and my career. So what happened is, after I finished my master's degree, I went back to Hong Kong, and I was actually a cataloger working in the hospital authority, Hong Kong Hospital Authority Library. So that was fascinating, just to have lots of books pass by my desk every day and doing the cataloging and being the first one to read all the new books. So that was a perk. If you have similar experience, do put on the chat. And so after so what happened? Okay, so I was in Hong Kong. I was doing the cataloging. Then I got a scholarship to actually to do my PhD. And so I flew to Singapore, and I spent a couple of years there. And my doctorate research topic was actually on information seeking and use behavior, ISU, what we call that at that time. And my research actually focusing on how do professionals actually look for information and connect with other people in the workplace context, right? So what's fascinating is that it wasn't called knowledge management then. So by the time I completed my doctorate research, a partner from Arthur Andersen called me in Singapore and said, Bonnie, would you like to, join us? And we are setting up the knowledge management practice at Arthur Andersen. And obviously they have a good knowledge management practice at that time, and everything was set up more in the States, in Atlanta. They didn't have a knowledge management hub. And I told the partner, I said, I've got no experience, but I've done my research, and my research is all about people in the workplace looking for information and finding one another. They say, and then she said, that's knowledge management. So with that, I joined Arthur Andersen in the business consulting practice, starting in Singapore, and then from Singapore, eventually moved to San Francisco. So it's a fascinating experience just to see. I feel very privileged to be able to use what I learned and my research and be able to apply it into the industry and in a real industry context. So that's the reason why I didn't go into postdoctorate, and I didn't go into the academia world, although I really love that part too. So I try to stay in touch by publishing paper or collaborating with people in academia, sometimes as adjunct lecturers in various universities and business school. But then I also have a very pragmatic hat on, and I want to do something real in the industry as well. So that's how I get into knowledge management. And then, so from Arthur Andersen, I moved to the British Council as the Director of Knowledge Management. And that's how I moved from San Francisco to the UK. And from then on, one industry to another, I start to move into different industries. And I remember the early days when we talk about knowledge management, it was more about creating knowledge base. Tell me if on the chat if you are doing something similar. I know in the various industry, I mean, it's like particularly in professional service firms, creating knowledge base, getting methodologies, toolkits readily accessible and available. But soon, I also get involved in not just creating knowledge base, but also creating people-to-people connection, right? So the way I define it, knowledge management is about connecting people to people and connecting people to information. And I'm early on, I'm very influenced by Robert Buckman. For those who still know him or remember him, Bob Buckman. Still have his book, and yeah, he was actually doing that in the 1960s. And yeah, so it's just, so for me, it's about not just about building database, knowledge base, information systems, but it's about connecting people. So that's why I start to venture into helping companies and colleagues to create communities of practice, to conduct social networking analysis to see how the network actually connect and how do they work together, storytelling, facilitation. It's all about bringing kind of hidden thoughts, hidden thinking, and sometimes even feelings to allow them to express their knowledge and ideas and to connect and collaborate with one another. So how did I actually end up from moving from knowledge management to digital transformation? As I do all this work, I need technologies to enable people to connect and collaborate, communicate, and work together. And therefore, I started to introduce collaboration technologies, communication technologies, social networking tools. It was called Enterprise 2.0 at some point. So bringing in social networking into organization, of course, intranet, knowledge base, crowdsourcing, ideation tools. So fascinating. And then I started not just doing that within a company, but actually started to do that externally with customers, with clients. And that's how I start wearing the title called head of digital marketing or communications. So it's like my world and my head is like my world is starting to blur. I don't know whether I'm called a knowledge manager, knowledge director, or digital transformation leader. And maybe that doesn't really matter. So how do I actually end up being labeled change management expert? Some people said that. I never think I'm an expert in that sense, but because I need to introduce all these new digital tools to the organization, when these digital tools were not mainstream, right? Imagine in 2010, I introduced social networking Enterprise 2.0 to Citibank. At that time, it was considered something for people to chit chat. It's not relevant for the business. You know, at that time, it's like, well, now when you think back, it's normal. But so I tend to be in the space when before these technologies get mainstream, started to introduce them to the organization. And how do I actually do that? And that's where people call me, oh, that's why you know about change management. So I do that by using all the knowledge management techniques that I know. And I did not realize that. And what do? I talk to people, right? I get people come together. I build communities. I facilitate. I get diversity of thoughts to come out. I get people to debate and discuss and agree to disagree. I get people to challenge one another. And as a result, people feel it's about co-creating the future together. So for me, that's KM. But people call it change management. So tell me your thoughts, whether you consider that change management KM. I'm lost myself, but maybe again, it does not really matter. So I become so at this point in my journey, it's almost like people will call me either you're in digital transformation or change management or knowledge management. And last year, as I explained earlier on, so I get into the space called learning and development. And again, learning and the people in the learning and development field they're really actually very interested in what knowledge management professionals are doing. Because as I showed you the 3 circles earlier, learning people realize that learning is no longer just about training and learning courses. So the learning become experience and exposure. So then I go one big round. It's like experience as exposure. It's really back to knowledge management, the connection, the collaboration. So that's my, in a very long story, that's my world. And I just find it fascinating that I just don't know whatever label people want to give me, call me, as long as it's adding, creating impact, doing something great for people, whether it's internally for the employees or for the external clients or customers, I'm happy. So love to hear your thoughts. I see lots of things coming onto the chat.
Lots of chat coming. You've been very provocative, Bonnie. I don't think we've seen this much chat so early in the session, actually. So I mean, there's a comment here from Helene about connecting people, and you've obviously talked a little bit about the technology, a little bit about the people, and clearly both components are quite important. I think there's a comment there from Dion around social media in the workplace, and I came from, when you were in financial services, that's where I came from, and that was still a pretty controversial technology at the time, because there was a lack of moderation, lack of control over what people could kind of put onto those platforms. So do you think there's more acceptance of that technology now in the enterprise, or is it still a problem?
Absolutely huge. I think enterprise has make huge progress, right? I was talking about 2010 when it's first introduced, right? We were just getting people to change their mindset that this is about chit-chatting and posting what grandma is having for breakfast, right? And then into, seriously, that's what people told me. I said, what is this all about? A sales director, we were saying, this is just for kids, right? So why am I blogging and talking about, my industry insight, right, in a particular area? And eventually they do it. So I think the huge progress is, yes, adoption is high in the enterprise. At the same time, people are starting to complain there's too much noise. Right. There's too much going on. So, we have to, I think it's back to free flow. To me, free flow, spontaneous communication. You always have that challenge that things become just noisy, right? Whereas that's where the facilitation, a bit of the structure, microstructure can come in. If you can stimulate the dialogue in a way that you encourage with some simple framework, encourage people to dig deeper, but have meaningful dialogue, right? So I tend to use, I mentioned that I did my doctorate research, and my doctorate research is about using a methodology, which is Dervin's sense-making methodology, to actually help to dig deeper, to help people to understand their needs, but also help people to communicate. So I've got a set of questions which I always use to ask people to dig deeper. And I think those sets of questions are as relevant in the face-to-face world as well as in the virtual world. So let me see whether I can find maybe a slide to show you. I hope I'm sharing my screen again. So, so this is Mr. Squiggly, which has followed me for, oops, I've lost him. So Mr. Squiggly, I know Paul is on the line. So I know Paul has seen this. Some of you who follow my work would know that. So that sense-making methodology starts with Mr. Squiggly. We are Mr. Squiggly. And when we understand our users, whether you call them learners or people who use your KM systems, if we think about them as living, breathing human beings, they are not just the analytical person and we think who they are. They come with their head, their hearts, their hands, their habits. And so there's a lot we need to consider. So the sense-making methodology, I will skip through all this, but what this is about is it's actually guiding me to actually facilitate dialogue in a way to dig deeper. I tend to ask people, it's like, tell me a situation, tell me what happened at that time. What led you to say that? Do you have questions, muddles, struggles? What is helping? What is hurting? How do you feel? Are there things that constrain you? Any power issue that you feel you cannot say? So these are some of the questions I feel, whether it's an online world, on the social media world, or even just or day-to-day, face-to-face meetings, we can actually use those and to allow us to create, less noise but dig deeper, if that makes sense, Dion. Long way to answer your question. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose a related point there is a question that's asked by Sanjay. Thank you, Sanjay. But it's about information seeking behavior. So in your time at AstraZeneca over the last 3 years, maybe particularly over the course of the last year or more, have you seen information seeking behavior changing, particularly with reference to drug development and new kind of techniques and technologies that are coming through with the operational teams at AstraZeneca as they've pursued vaccines and the like?
I wouldn't talk specific about vaccine, but just talk about drug development, right? Information seeking and behavior. It's yes, actually there's two parts to it. I would say there's one part which has never changed. Information seeking behavior. It's just human evolution, right? We all survive, we all learn, we all grow. It's just whether you do anything or not, you're naturally doing that anyway, right? So that's one part. But that's another part. Information seeking behavior is of course linked to technologies. As new technologies come into the picture, there are different ways, better ways for you to seek knowledge, to get connected with experts, right? So I was talking about even like social networking. It already changed from the older days where we rely on, controlled, centralized knowledge base, right? So somebody needs to curate, somebody needs to put the information in, somebody needs to do a search. That's one way of information seeking. To nowadays, right, if you are able to leverage your network, and I don't mean just your team, but your wider network, you can actually create new ideas, new innovation through tapping into your network. So think about it, the information seeking behavior is changed in that sense. You have new opportunity to connect with a wider network that you will never have in the past, right? Whether people understand the opportunity and make the best use of these capabilities, that's where the digital transformation challenge is, because some people still live in the old world, the comfortable world, and they make assumptions that that is how work gets done. And therefore, some of these new technologies, again, they will see this as just some nice fancy tools, but have not really thought about how they can truly help them to do things differently, not do the same thing the same way.
That's a really interesting point, because Kim has said about like connectedness, but particularly when working from home. So again, over the course of the last year, as people have been forced out of the regular work setting, have you found that that's driven adoption of these tools a little more?
100% or 200%. Right.
Oh, right.
So,
okay.
So for some of you who've been in this space for a long time, you know that we have in a sense, struggle in the past 20 years to convince many of the senior executives or even managers to embrace the technologies that are already available, right? Because it's just comfortable and it's the habit, right? We talk about that people just continue to do things in the way that they've been doing that forever. I think this year it's good in the sense that it forced everyone to get out of the comfort zone, because there's no choice, right? So in March, for example, in my company, no one has any choice, but we are all at home other than people in the lab. And we all need to learn how to connect, communicate, and collaborate using a range of tools from MS Teams to Zoom, to MyRobot, MuroBot, to run workshops and interactive experience. So it has changed 200%. And the change I not just observe, but I've been asked to coach my colleagues is not just how to use the tools. That's basic, I call it. So in March, we got the questions. It's just about what tool should we use? How do we use those tools? But very soon, I would say in 2 or 3 months' time, the conversation has changed. What I've asked to help my company is actually look at how do we help people to be remotely human? Remote meaning, yes, we are connected using all these virtual tools, but actually, back to the sense-making questions I shared with you earlier, how do we actually stay true to our humanness, and how do we make sure when we connect with one another online, we take care of those, whether it's feelings, hidden thoughts, things remain unsaid. How do you bring those out? Because now that you look at the screen, some of you, I don't see you, I only see a name. And you are so small. I can only judge you from that screen. How much cues have I missed? Are you interested? Are you not interested? Are there things that you feel you want to say, but for whatever reason, you just have not said it yet? How do I pick those out? Unless I consciously facilitate in a way to ask people, then let's put that onto the table, right? It's almost like you need to give different type of permission, have different type of dialogue. And if you put your normal meeting, like for like, move that 1 hour meeting online, it's not the same experience. So we actually need to get people to think about how you design those experience and the interaction in a totally different way.
I mean, I think it's an interesting comment because, you know, I wonder whether experience has shown that, and I've certainly sort of come across this, where companies deploy a technology and then really just expect people to adopt it and embrace it and use it effectively, which often I think is because it's social media, everybody does it. But the context and the setting which everybody does it, you know, Facebook or Instagram or whatever, is very different to a work setting. And I wonder to what extent, you know, those people skills need to be balanced with the technological aspects, and whether organizations tend to over-egg the technology a little bit, have too higher expectation. And actually there's a little, that coaching is required really to enable people to make the most of the technology and draw the most benefit from it. So you can talk a little bit about the people skills and how that's worked for you, and what some techniques that you found useful.
Yeah, I'm definitely nodding here, right? A lot of people talk about, you know, the 80-20 rule, or whatever percentage it is, right? I've rolled out so many different types of technologies in various companies. Always say is like, you know, you put 20% of the effort in the technology implementation, and then the rest is 80% is about people. Why? Right. Because people, whenever you give people a new piece of technology, right, it can be something very simple. People will be wondering, so what's in it for me? Why do I need to be bothered? And nowadays with AI and all these new fancy tools, people start to be feel very worried and scared as well. What does that mean? Is this going to replace my job? Do I need to bother or not, or just hide myself, assume that the world is going to be, you know, all right and nothing will happen to me? So I think it's a lot about even the psychology of when these things come in, what goes into people's head. Do you actually have a dialogue, not just dialogue? Do you give them time and space to do some collective sense making? For example, part of what, again, people will label me as change management effort is like, I get people together who have to, who are about to experience some new digital tools to do clinical trials. And I ask them to actually just in small group or one-on-one or 3 or 4 people, peer-to-peer, just sharing with one another. Right? What is this? What does that mean to me? How do I feel about it? What comes into your mind that makes me worried? Right? What are the questions I have? And even just by having them to have those dialogue, that actually they say is quite therapeutic. Just to know that somebody is listening and they are supporting one another. And at the same time, as the leadership team, you actually get valuable sound bites to actually inform and co-create whatever that is to come. So it's quite fascinating when you start to look at it from a people perspective. And
so something that's come up in previous sessions that we've done is talk about building social capital, you know, particularly for new people coming into the organization. So you know, you've talked a little bit about how you can build that kind of professional networking capability. You talked a little bit there about the dialogue that goes on in drug development teams and the like. But often, you know, the piece that's missing is that kind of water cooler conversation. It's that serendipitous encounter in the corridor, at the canteen, or, you know, wherever, to have those conversations, people. So have you looked at that kind of interaction and how that can be replicated on a platform like some of the digital platforms we have?
Yeah, let me tease everyone a bit here. Yeah, so I hope it makes it interesting for everyone. So I use that in my company. And I asked people, let me skip to this slide. So may I ask all of you, right? And I do that with my colleagues. It's like, think about in your day-to-day work, right? What kind of networks actually support your own learning or your own working? Do you tend to rely on, method A or B or C? You can put it on the chat. I'm curious to see, what you think. And this is linked to I'm not skipping the question, but this is linked to the serendipity piece that, you were asking me. So I see Paul put in B. Yeah, any other thoughts? Yeah, C. Let's give it a moment and see. Oh, a lot of people focusing on C, a bit of B. Right. Cool. Keep them coming, right? So the reason I show you this is when we talk about, let me move to the next slide. Something that I'm introducing to my colleagues is that if you think about, when you say serendipity, maybe before we go to serendipity, it's like when you work as a network, right? And we talk about knowledge sharing. Actually, there are different types of network. And thank you, someone who put ABC. Yes, we probably experience all ABC, right? But what does that mean, right? Very often we work in very stable teams. We know who one another is. We are locked into that wider function or project. So you work as in the bottom left-hand corner here, right? It's a structured team, and you network and collaborate in a very different way to the other circles, right? The other one in the middle, if you choose B, it's kind of a community of practice. You're not in that function, but you are doing similar work. So you end up connecting with others who are doing similar work, right? And many of you here, I would imagine you may be promoting community of practice in your organization. So that's a different kind of networking and different ways of working, right? So you're not a stable team, but you are stable enough to have shared interest and kind of share processes to exchange ideas with one another. What's really interesting when we talk about Enterprise 2.0 or the wider social network is that top right-hand corner, this is where you actually don't know one another, and you still can tap into and reach out to network and the diversity of ideas and thoughts and expertise out there. And that's where you create a lot of the serendipitous encounter, right? These are the people you don't know. That's why you actually help yourself to come out of your box, come out of your own domain, and start to see the linkage with other area. So if you talk about serendipitous, for me, a lot, of course, you can have some serendipitous encounter for each one of the bubble. But I think as you move up to the top right, that's where a lot of really interesting cross-fertilization of ideas come in. The question is, how can you make this happen? I mean, for me, I will have to ask, how can I make this happen in a company with 70,000 people, right? So do you just, and back to the point about when we are doing all our work online, how do we make sure that we're not just locked in our online silo? I've got people come to me and they say, I have enough of my team. I see them day and night. I see them, it's like back-to-back meetings. It's all the same team member. Where do I bump into others at the corridor anymore? I can't just put my head into the laptop and start to bump into other teams, right? And that's the power of, we need to start thinking about, of course, social networking tools can help, because then if you put yourself out there, I call it work out loud, you invite people to connect with you, even though they don't know you, right? And that's done through blogging or sharing your thoughts. That's one way. But there are other ways that I have experimented in my company last year. So we formed Learning Out Loud circles. What does that mean? We are bringing 4 people who do not know one another, who sit in different area, one from R&D, one for commercial, one from an enabling unit. We bring them together and they decide what they want to learn and explore, and they do it 1 hour per week for 4 weeks. The comment I got is, Bonnie, thank you very much. We don't even do that when we don't live in this COVID, virtual world. You are creating serendipitous moment for us to connect and to learn from one another. So people appreciate that. And that's quite, it's a surprise, right? We didn't do that because of COVID and want people to be linked in a different way. I designed this and created this because of the 3 E's that I talked about earlier. So I want to create opportunity for people to get exposure to one another. But anyway, so the unintended consequence is actually it does help during the COVID period that people start to bump into other in the corridor, which is not possible in a COVID world. The other thing I've also tried within my company is we actually organize water cooler sessions. And I invite people to meet me at the water cooler every Friday. There's a 1-hour water cooler in the middle of the day, because we try to make sure that some people from Asia can join, and people, early birds, people who get up early in the morning from the States can join. And these people come together, and each week we have a special theme. And when they come to these sessions, there's only maximum of 5-minute lecture, if we call it lecture at all, but it's a little bit of introduction. And then it's all about peer-to-peer sharing, learning, exploring about themselves, supporting and giving ideas to one another. These people don't know one another, but somehow we created the attractor, right, a magnet, and people will think about it, know about water cooler, and then they grab their friends to come along. So that's one of the, so to your point, again, a very long answer to a serendipitous question. Those are the things we are experimenting. And that's why, to me, if you ask me, is this knowledge management, knowledge sharing, collaboration, learning, change, digital? To me, maybe they're all one bucket.
Yeah, no, I mean, you mentioned the magnet there to attract people. I mean, that's the counterbalance here, isn't it? In terms of you're almost engineering an encounter, if you want to call like a water cooler encounter.
Yep.
But often it's the engagement. So what is it? What's most successful? What's the best hooks to draw people in and get them to participate in those sessions, or and to actually maximize the engagement across the teams?
So the question is, how do I draw people in?
Yes.
I think I draw people in by creating some emotional connection. So the first water cooler, we only have 20 people, because people don't even know what it is. They come to me, by the time they finish that 1 hour, they say, Bonnie, I didn't know that's what I'm going to experience. I don't know what it is. They might think it's just another lecture. And they realize it's not. By the time they come in, I think you experience a little bit today. By the time they come into the workshop, they already know that they are welcome as an individual with the individual voice and feelings and emotion. I ask them about, what do you see, right? What do you look outside the window? What do you see? How do you feel? If you have a dream, what is that dream like? Then they suddenly realize, oh, it's not about somebody talking to me. It's about me. Then they ask me, Bonnie, can I take your approach to my team? I say, of course. So I've got the deck behind the facilitation guide, and some of the slides, you've seen it, right? It's just simple slides, 1 or 2 slides. And they say, can I replicate? I say, yes. When's your meeting? She said, in an hour's time. I say, go, use it. Use the stack, talk to people. So we scale it that way. And the next week, they bring more people along. So that's, for me, again, people, technology, if you see where the emphasis is people, right? But of course, it needs to be enabled by technology. Otherwise, none of these can happen easily. Some people call the learning out loud circles my Tinder service. They say it's the Tinder. They compare it to, oh, that's how you swipe and connect people. I do it manually. I don't have the technology. I mean, I'm sure we are playing with new technologies to do that, but we just do it manually. Does it really matter? You connect 4 people and then bring them into a room. We just give them the methodology. We don't need to do the facilitation.
Perhaps the next trend then is moving beyond enterprise social media to enterprise Tinder. Then in that case, maybe you can just keep swiping. As I understand it, I've never used it personally, but there you go.
Did I not ask you to check it out from our prep call?
You did, but I didn't do that.
Okay, you declared that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kim asks a little bit about a question about sort of curiosity and play. And what role they play in terms of are they a big driver for people? People being curious, people want to come in and kind of play in the environment, and does that kind of help with the success of building these platforms and the curation of learning and sharing and that connected experience?
Huge, yeah, of course, yeah. Curiosity, it's linked to innovation, it's linked to getting out of your own box, right? Diversity of thoughts. Maybe one thing I can share with you, which is what I'm introducing to my company as part of the Learning for Life promotion. Let me find this slide. Okay, all right. So hopefully, so let me share with you why I'm interested in this. Okay, so that should work. Right, so what this is about is, remember I talked about my role is to promote knowledge sharing, last year's, not just knowledge sharing, but it's learning for life, and then about the 3 E's. But what does that mean? It's just abstract, woolly words for many people. Of course, it's good, motherhood and apple pie, learning for life, everybody learn. But people just don't know what exactly they need to do in order to make learning just part of your habit. So I actually talk about those water cooler sessions. It's built using this framework behind it. These water cooler sessions actually get people to practice these kind of habits. It's about being very deliberate about reflection, either reflecting as an individual or reflecting as a team, peer to peer. And talk about curiosity, innovation, and growth mindset is a key component. We actually get people to be curious, to take a different route to walk to work when we can walk to work, or do something different that's unfamiliar. So that is about, there's a whole set of skills talking about how do we actually be innovative, be curious, and to have a growth mindset so that we are, ready and happy to explore and not feeling challenged. So that's another slice of that. A lot of emphasis, as you can experience a bit today, right? A lot of inclusive meetings. How do we run inclusive meetings? Have meaningful dialogue that we can agree to disagree and can challenge one another. That's another slice that we encourage people to practice. And with tools and habits, something that they can practically do. Psychological safety, right? Talking about encouraging people to speak up, to provide coaching, feed forward with one another. And we talk about the last slice, which is about working as a network, right? So this become more real, something more real habits for people that they can use and embrace. And only, for me personally, I feel that only by adopting these practices, not just by coming to a water cooler session or coming to a training organized by learning and development team, if we do these habits every moment in our meeting, in everything we do, we will naturally be learning and unlearning at the same time, because this is a dynamic, fluid model. Only by doing that, you will also challenge yourself, or you'll be challenged by others, but you'll also help challenge others. And that's, as a result, you as an individual learn, and your team will learn, and the company as a whole will learn, right? So when I first started my journey, the learning development professionals may not actually see this is learning, right? So if I show you this this pizza, 5 slices and say that's learning, would you make the direct connection? So for some, maybe yes, some maybe no, right? So, and my experience is typically people start with thinking about learning, back to my earlier point, learning is about training, or it's about, at least it's about helping people to get the right answer, the best practices, the procedures to do the job. And to me, I see that is one part of learning. And if we only focus on that part, the lifelong learning will never happen, because your assumption, your starting point is already teaching people what's right. When in a fast changing world, lifelong learning is about, there are things that we may think is right, and those assumptions may not be valid anymore. So how do we help everyone to actually start to learn, to both learn and unlearn, to build habit and break habits?
Right. There was the interesting title on that slide was Learning Agility. You just touched on a fast moving world. And actually, Paul, when he came into the conversation, asked a question about agile working. His question was specifically in reference to the vaccine. I'm not sure if you feel able to speak specifically to that, but I'm guessing agile as a technique has been broadly adopted in many organizations, and I guess AstraZeneca is no different. So how's your work really dovetailed with that kind of adoption of agile working? Is that and what are the benefits that you've seen from that transformation?
My work is definitely linked to the agile ways of working. I partner very closely within my company. We have an agile center of enablement. We're creating a strong alignment, because if you look at the pizza slices that I've shown you, and for those who are truly into the agile space, you will notice that those behaviors are critical to a team working effectively together, and to learn and unlearn all the time, every day, every week, right? Whether you call it retro or not. So I would say, yes, this is part of agile, right? In a sense, it's just an agile ways of working. But I do want to differentiate that is fake agile and true agile behavior, right? If you just follow the procedures and tick all the check boxes and think you have done agile without truly addressing the foundational behavior that we're talking about here.
Right.
Then,
so it's a fundamental that goes with agile, that this kind of agile learning, as you said, the learning, the unlearning is central to that.
Yeah, one of the core principle is about this continuous learning, right? Agile is just by default, it is about that. But then the question is, how do you do that? How do you make sure that that's happening?
Absolutely. Paul wants to ask a question. I see his hand up.
Hi, Bonnie. It's not so much a question. I just wanted to follow on from the agile comment and just share something. Are we still recording?
We are. Careful.
Then I perhaps don't want to. Okay, an organisation that has mnemonics ABC. I ran a workshop, 2-day session. It's been on social media, so people know about it. But last week, and it was around actually equipping the agile business community to start to employ knowledge management techniques. So that what was so fascinating was the crossover between the two, between the agile business community and knowledge management. And the word that sort of hangs them together is curate. It's that ability to assemble stuff and not lose it, and to be able to reuse it in a very interesting way. That was just my observation.
I love that, Paul. And yeah, I think there is so much, I mentioned that earlier, there's so much that the knowledge management field, right? If we don't define knowledge management as just managing, systems and knowledge base, there is so much that we have defined and created as work practices that can be brought to the agile world. And I would say not just the agile world, but just generally the business world. And I think that's where I see, the title of this session, right, is like blurring the line between all these different subject domain, right? Those are all artificial labels. But at the core of all these different domains, I think that's where really the various behaviors we talk about, that's coming together, whatever you call it. And only by practicing those, you can learn, unlearn, you can develop habit, and, also get rid of some of the habits. And then so together, you're actually moving forward. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, so we only have 4 or 5 minutes left to run. I just looking at Sanjay's made a comment here about aligning KM with Agile Manifesto within an organization. And I think it's easy to make that connection, as you've already spoken about Agile and Scrum models and the way in which these things move forward. So I think that's great. I don't think we need to dig in on that any further. 1 minute. I've never heard of unlearning before. So can you enlighten me, Bonnie, as to what unlearning is in 1 minute?
Unlearning is learning, right? But there are things you learn because you start to challenge some of the assumptions, some of the habits, some of the things you are so familiar with. And learning is also, think about is an aha moment that you realize that you're actually learning something new, but you at the same time you recognize that some of the assumptions and the status quo, need to be changed. So yeah, I do have debate with with colleagues and professionals in this space, some people say, you should not call it unlearning, it's just learning. I say, it doesn't really matter as long as we are conscious that there are things. I think we need to think about the world it's changing very fast. There is a part, if we make it very simple, there's a part of the world that is stable and you can predict, we know what processes you need to take to get there. But there's also a part that is changing so fast that actually nobody knows the answer, right? And if all the learning is about learning about the stable world, we miss one whole chunk of the exploration, of the innovation, of the, you just don't know what we don't know yet.
No. Yeah.
So, and if we apply the same learning approach or knowledge management approach to deal with that world, I think we won't be catching up with what the business and what the world need.
Right. Yeah, I think there's the old saying is if you just continue to do the same thing, you'll get the same outcomes and the same results. So it's how you shape that up, how you challenge those assumptions, and how you do things differently in order to get to different outcomes, I guess.
Yeah, and then I also have this debate. It's like it's easy to say that within this group, I treat you all as converts, right? But there are also people who are skeptical when you said to them, right? Let's say in an operations or in a factory, right? When you manage a big factory and you start to tell them that, oh, things need to be very fluid, might change, it's very agile. They say, what? I've got a business to run, I've got processes to to maintain, regulatory compliance that I must adhere to. So I'm not saying yes or no. I'm saying that look at your business context. There are areas that you need the stability. Then you use the right approach. You can still use the old approach. Doesn't mean it's not valid. But for those stable contexts. But if you are in the space of not knowing what the answer is and you start to explore, and if you still use those approach to do your work or to support others, you will not be effective, right? And we need to challenge ourselves.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think that's a great spot to finish at. I don't know if you want to take a skim through the chat, Bonnie, to pick anything out that you thought was a great question.
I have not got a chance really to.
Another chance to do that, or maybe the other thing is, I don't know how you feel about this, but we only have 21 people, so it's a fairly small, fairly intimate group. But I would guess that if somebody wants to reach out to you and has further questions or would like to get some time with you, you'd be open to receiving those kind of messages.
Yeah, so what I've got is I've put a link onto the chat with some of the presentation and materials. Okay. You may want to, dig deeper. There are other presentations I've done. I'm skipping through all this. And for those of you who are interested, my company, we've also created a COVID-19 employee and leaders toolkit. And we consciously make it available to the whole world. So initially it's only developed for employees, and then it's on our website. So you can check it out under the COVID-19 section. And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can go to the sense-making.org website, which you can see my blog and some of my presentations. And I always give credit to my mentor, Dr. Brenda Dervin, for the ongoing inspiration and guidance. And she always says she's an 83-year-old lady now. She can reply to all the messages, so they direct them to me.
That's great. Okay.
Well, it's fascinating to have the good crowd here. Thank you for being so active. On the chat, and it's lovely. I will read through that. I'm saving it, and I will read through that after the session. And feel free to put in your comments and thoughts. Usually in my water cooler session, I'll end with what is the one thing you have taken away for yourself, right, from this session, whatever it is. There's no right or wrong, and I will encourage people to put on the chat if you're willing.
Okay, no, I'm sure there'll be a few people plugging that in there, I'm sure. Okay, look, Bonnie, it's been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fascinating. I personally was really looking forward to this, particularly with it being so topical around AstraZeneca and all of the work that you and your colleagues have been doing to basically help us be safe. So I'd really want to extend a big thank you to you and everybody at Astra for that on behalf of KNIM and some of the part of the profession at least. And yeah, I hope everybody else has enjoyed the time. We're at the top of the hour, and so thank you very much indeed, and we'll hope to see you next time. And next time, what we're hoping to do sometime in February is to do a little bit of a reprise of the conference session, the CILIP conference session that we did with a panel of speakers talking about trends in information management. Little less focus on KM this time, trying to keep a little bit of balance. But that would involve Richard Gaston, Penny Leach, and Helene's going to help me out. Simon Burton, I think, were the 3 panel members, as well as myself and Helene. So that's not scheduled yet, but we will let everybody know just as soon as that's in the diary. And once again, Bonnie, thank you very much indeed. It's been absolutely fabulous, and thanks to everybody for joining.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.